Good morning, welcome to my channel. My name is David Okun. Thank you for your help. And I've been speaking about the European Union, which is actually a political project and a political and economic project in Europe. And also, it actually has to do with the global politics and policies, including how the global economy is run. I've been talking about the different elements of the European Union. If you have watched the rest of my video, you will find that I've been actually speaking about the European Union, the different elements of the European Union, in terms of speaking about the European Union in terms of the cost of living. The cost of living is it's a global crisis, and like I said in the other videos, if you have watched the other videos I've been recording, I've repeated it over and over that the cost of living is an income problem. If your income is low, then you suffer. The cost of living is a crisis. I've also said the cost of living is caused by the economic system of capitalism, particularly the marketized component of capitalism. Therefore, the cost of living is a crisis. It's caused by the government, which deliberately refuse to support the public sector. To promote capitalism in the marketized version, it is necessary for the state to stop funding the public sector. To stop funding the public sector it's necessary to actually shut the public sector down. And the reason I've been saying this over and over, so that people understand the problem they're facing, and they should also understand that if the government shuts down, like it is doing now, shut down the public sector, then the government will no longer be helping people who need help. And I've also said that because the cost of living necessarily, and also the difficulties people face in terms of lack of the public sector, has to do with income. People who are actually wealthy do not need the public sector. And I've also stated elsewhere in the videos that if you work for a living in the UK where I live, or in Europe where the UK is also located, the UK is located in Europe, and also within the developed world where Europe is located, and within the Western world where the developed world is located, and then elsewhere where the developed worlds are located, in other parts also where the economy has developed, like in the Middle East, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, and all those nations, and on the other places like Australia, but also parts of Africa now developing. In these regions, the behavior of the market as an economic instrument is similar or actually the same. And for those who saw me discussing about globalization, there is something called harmonization under the global economic project. But within the European Union also, I've been speaking about the European Union, there is also a concept of harmonization within Europe that affect actually member states of the European Union. Member states are these countries who join the European Union to become members, and whatever policy the European Union produces, whatever policies they produce, these actually affect member states first, but also countries which actually have a relationship, economic and political relationship with the member state of Europe. In other words, the European Union affect the economy of the globe entirely. That's why wherever you are, even if you see that, even if you're in Africa, even if or other parts of the world, maybe China, if you see that I'm talking about the European Union, you might think if you're in Britain, for example, or in America, Canada, you may begin to think that what is the relevance? The relevance is that the European Union is part of the global economy. It drives globalization. And because of globalization, every country of the world is involved directly or indirectly. It is I mean, it affect it activities in every country affect the global system, and the global system also affect nation states, whether you are in Africa, whether you are elsewhere. So it is necessary for people to understand how the system works. In the sense, like I also said previously, that if there is a problem, a crisis, such as now happening with the cost of living, and also in a situation where the government now is withdrawing help from the public, especially in the developed world, but also in the developing world, the behavior of the government is such that the public sector is now being withdrawn, so that people who work for a living can no longer get help from the state, and that meaning you have to help yourself, and people therefore need to be aware and begin to prepare to change their mindset and to change the way they think, the way they behave, believing that the state is there for them. And the state, if it actually doesn't provide the public's economy and the public services, that means the state is no longer for the people of this country, in Britain, in Europe, or in other parts of the world. And this is because of globalization, because the global agenda involves the state promoting the market economic system, which actually promotes something called individualism. Individuals who are actually super rich, multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, are the ones who will actually benefit from the marketized capitalism, because they have money. They don't need the government. This is actually about 10% of the population. The 90% of the population will not have access to world resources. And this is a serious matter, and people should really be aware. So the solution to the problem is to get out of poverty in the first place, and also once you are out of poverty, you need to get rich to be part of the global economy. Because if you don't, then you're going to be in serious trouble. This is from now going forward, because the cost of living is a sign of these problems, which is actually caused deliberately by human behavior, human decisions, the government deciding on one route of the policy and economic approach. Like I said, um, you know, the globalization means capitalism uh, in a marketized sense of the word, which means the market, which is actually the market simply means private, big, big. I mean, the market means private companies run the economy. The public businesses are shut down. That is, the public sector is shut down. The private sector is the one left to run the global economy. And in terms of globalization, it's going to be big businesses. Small and medium businesses are going to shut down. Only big businesses will remain. Big businesses mean businesses which are actually wealthy, which are rich. Been saying this again and again, and I'll be continuing to say it, because the cost of living is, as a crisis, just the beginning. And in the next 5, 10 years, 100 years, going forward, the problem will grow worse and worse for two reasons. One, the market system means only those who are rich can access world resources. The second reason is that, as societies, we have been fighting. We have seen now in Sudan. We saw it in Ukraine and Russia. So the history of society has always involved war because we fight all the times, and there is no evidence that, if the world cannot stop the war in Sudan happening now, then where is our civilization? Because the global community should have now stopped the war in Sudan. They should have stopped the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. But because we want to fight, it's a choice we have made. Politicians and other people may say something else, but warfare is deliberate because we enjoy it. It's like humans enjoy war. We watch war videos, cinemas, movies. We watch war movies. We make more war movies and we enjoy watching it. It is in our behavior that we enjoy war. It doesn't matter how dangerous it is. The newspaper actually sells, or even the TV is activated when there is crisis. It's like war makes money. Without war, probably those who make money probably will not make money. Whether it is through movie or television or through stories, we like war. And that is a problem. That means even if we are rich, even if we develop, when we do development, like producing good technology to eradicate poverty, there is no guarantee that there's going to be peace. So that's why I've been repeating over again that we need to start learning not only to do development. If you are an ordinary person, learn how to invest, to run your own business. Small and medium businesses are now struggling. They will be closing down. So if you still can do that now, start doing it. If you have a job, keep that job. Save the money, learn how to manage your money. Because if you don't get out of poverty, you're going to get into serious trouble. Hospitals are closing down. For those who don't have money, for those who rely on government system, the hospital service is no longer for you. Public service is not, public transport is no longer for you. You don't have it. Public housing is going to be closing down. For the reason that these services are actually funded by the government. If the government doesn't fund it, it does not exist. People need to understand this and begin to prepare. Whatever you have now, use it to the best of your ability. If you can go to university to study, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you can still get help from the government to go back to uni and study something, do that. Because if you have knowledge, if you have research skills, if you have study skills, you can actually, perhaps it will help you to survive. Because we as an economy we are becoming actually knowledge based. If you don't have knowledge, which is why actually the internet is very important, you should spend some time learning something. So if you are suffering from the cost of living, become an expert on the cost of living. The best way to do that is to learn about the cost of living. That's why I've been talking about, I've been producing this video. Use this video, watch it if you have the time. It doesn't matter if you are in Britain or you're in Africa understand the causes of the cost of living, and then you will understand the solution. The solution is actually to get out of poverty, maximize your income. The way to do that is actually to work and work and work and save and save and save. If you were living in Europe or America, in where welfare state is provided or welfare benefit is provided, if it is still provided, if you get the money, use it wisely. But if you have an opportunity, find work as in terms of employment. Work as hard as you can, save your money, learn, be an expert of money management. Because if you don't manage your money, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you will be poor. And if you don't get out of poverty, every door will be locked. You cannot survive. Your children will not survive. And their children will not survive. People should change the way they think. Because, the system is changing, the public sector is shutting down. And that is why now it's getting harder. Now, if you go to dentist right now, and if you tell them you're actually on the government program, National Health Service, NHS, dentist, you are not going to register. The chances are you are not going to register anymore. They are no longer taking NHS patients, including also general practice, including anything healthcare within the UK or Europe or wherever. Anything public is now not being supplied because the government is no longer funding it. And the public transport, all of it, most of it are now privatized. They're being run by the private company. So the government will be withdrawing funding from this private company. Buses and train fares will go up and it will never go down because the government is slowly withdrawing funding. The same with education. So more and more people will find it harder to access education because education is funded by the government and the government is no longer funding it because the philosophy is that the public sector should be shut down and everything should be shut down to do with public sector. And then the private sector will also be shut down eventually. Of course, technology will then be running society. But this is going to be in the future. But in the next 10 to 20, maybe 50 to 100 years, the private sector will be the main component of the economy being actually run by big businesses, big corporations. And that means rich people will get richer and poor people will be poorer. The poorer you are, the more you are going to be disenfranchised. The police will be shutting down, the military will be shutting down. And when it's shut down, it will be privatized. So now the security system is being privatized. You see the private securities across the globe, even in Africa, including traffic wardens. The growth of private security, even close protection, physical security, CCTV, cyber security is private. And people need to understand this. Everything is being solved. The police will be closed down. The police is a public sector. Anything public will be closing down. People may not believe this, but even the army, the military system is going to be privatized. You see, it will be there, but it's going to be private. We have seen the growth of mercenaries. That's the direction of travel. Everything is going to be privatized. And that's why I'm talking about the European Union, because the European Union is the greatest power on earth at the moment. We may think of the USA and China. We may even still be thinking of Russia or other countries. But the European Union, in the reality, and going forward, the EU as a country will be the most powerful nation on earth. And although now the information we get from Europe is that independent states are forming, are joining to form what is the European Union. But if you look at the other videos I've actually posted, I've been examining the institution of the European Union, the power uh, being swayed by the European Union, then you will know that actually Europe is a state. It's a super state, and it's going to grow along that direction. It literally, it's now the third largest economy in the world after US and China. So going forward, the European Union is going to be the most powerful instrument, economic and political instrument in the world, and is going to be controlling the United Nations and all the military systems of the world. You see an equivalence in Africa, African Union, the East African Community, ECOWAS in West Africa, and there's another one in South Africa. So you see the harmonization of African Union. So we're going to create a federal state of Africa, like you see in Europe and America and the Asia Pacific. All this region will congregate, and eventually they're going to all unite to create globalization, the global state. There will be one state in the world called the global economic system. There will be something called the global village. So if you are an African, you'll be traveling without a passport anywhere in the world, which in a sense is good considering that Africans are now rejected almost from everywhere. But I wouldn't say that Africans are rejected because they're African. Because you see, if you have money, it doesn't matter how black or white you are, you're allowed in any country. That's how it works. Even during the lockdown, um, wealthy people were able to travel. Poor people were not able to travel because they could not afford um, uh, being quarantined in hotels because the cost of hotels and all this prevented them. Every policy being put forward to prevent maybe something like environment is actually designed to exclude poor people from accessing the economy. So right now we're looking at the agricultural policy, agriculture and fishery policy in Europe, which actually, agriculture and fishery actually is food and nothing else. Agriculture and fishery is about food. But there are other issues also associated with food production. And there are other things to do with energy also. The cost of living is related. The cost of living is related to food, the cost of food, and the cost of energy. So I'm looking at something called common agricultural policy in the European Union, and the common fisheries policy, and we are looking at how something called European Fisheries Control Agency and European Food Safety Authority. It's to do with food and policy, to do with food production and food policy and food supply. So we look at certain issues to do with the European Union's exclusive economic zone, EEZ, which is actually standing at 25 million square kilometers. This is area of exclusivity with regard to the economic activity and benefits in the European Union, and it stands at 25 million square kilometers. It is the largest in the world. This is actually the EEZ, the EU Exclusive Economic Zone. So the Common Agricultural Policy (CAP) is the agricultural policy of the European Union. it implements a system of agricultural subsidies and other programs. Subsidies is when the government support agriculture. It is actually when the government subsidizes agriculture, it maintain it actually helps to maintain the price of food and food products. Maintenance means actually it keeps it controls the price. The price is when there is food subsidy, agricultural subsidy, it actually um, it complements the market system. If the government doesn't provide subsidies for agriculture, then the market will decide the prices and the cost of food will be determined by the market, and that's why there's the cost of living because uh, even within the European Union, food and fuel subsidies are being removed because of capitalism. So it was introduced in 1962 and has since then undergone several changes to reduce the EEC budget cost from 70% in 1985 to 37% in 2017 and consider rural development in its aims. So, like I said, it is being reduced. The reason it's being reduced since its introduction in 1962, and 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 and, and, uh, and the changes. Every time the government talk of changes, it means actually shutting down the public sector and withdrawing the way to shut down the public sector is actually to withdraw funding. So when it says the common agricultural the subsidy as was introduced in 1962 and has since then undergone several changes to reduce the EEC budget costs. So EEC budget costs, when you talk about cost, talk about efficiency, cutting down waste, it means the government is actually cutting down public support for public services because food is part of public services, part of welfare. So it actually was reduced from 73% in 1985, and it is now in 2017 is now being reduced to 37% in subsidies and consider rural development in its aim. So rural development is associated with things like agriculture and fishery. It has, however, been criticized on the grounds of its costs and its environmental and humanitarian effect. Now, when people criticize its subsidies and the criticism on the ground of the cost of subsidy, what they're saying is that the government should not, what they're actually saying, the government should not subsidize the economy, including agriculture in this example. And I've said it in the other videos about the environmental and humanitarian effects. These are actually excuses because when they talk about environment, they're saying the government should not spend money on public economy to develop public economy. That's what they're saying. Every time somebody is saying development is actually damaging the environment, they are talking about public sector. Well, that means their philosophy, their ideology actually is to promote capitalism, to promote privatization. They want the government to spend money on the private companies, the private sector. They do not want the public sector. I know there are people who are actually campaigning legitimately for cleaner environment, and there is an environmental issue, but the politics of the environment has been tainted by geological consideration. Every time people talk about the cost of government spending, whenever a person complains about the cost of government spending, they are saying the government should not waste money on the public sector. But the public sector is there to help over 90% of the population anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter which country you're in. And that's why I was speaking about globalization. I'm now talking about the European Union because of something called harmonization. What happens in Europe happens anywhere in the world. That's what harmonization means. And so, if there's an issue arising to do with cost or of government spending, when the government spend money, if they on the private companies, nobody complains. People who actually support capitalism are happy. They want the government to spend all the money on private company, but they don't want to tell the truth. Either because they don't know the truth or they are confused. But they keep criticizing the government of wasting money. That's what they do with the cost of public spending. So when they talk about damaging environment, they are saying the government should not spend money on the public sector as a mode of development. Every time somebody complain about development, it's being impacting. People who actually campaign to protect the environment are saying the government should not develop the economy. But what they're actually saying, they should not develop the public sector of the economy. Because these people are actually promoting capitalism and they hide behind environmental issues to prevent the government to develop the public sector of the economy. And their argument of humanitarian impact of the government costs, what they're actually saying that when the government wastes, when the government spend money on the public sector, it is wasting money, and it's causing poverty and environmental degradation. So this is going to impact on humans, and this is not necessarily true. There may be an impact. What actually impacts on humans is actually when the government doesn't spend money on the public sector, when it closes down the public sector. It's the opposite. So food subsidy and energy subsidy actually would prevent things like the cost of living as a crisis. So to say the government should not subsidize the economy, including energy and food, is to say the cost of living should be allowed to continue. But this is actually affecting 90% of the population who are poor, who work for a living. Suppose to say these kind of things are actually not interested in the poor people, they're only interested in wealthy people. So, in other words, the environmental argument and the humanitarian argument preventing the government from giving subsidies to the public sectoral development. These are actually anti-environment. In the first place, they are anti-humans also. Likewise, the Common Fishery Policy (CFP) is the fisheries policy of the European Union. So, like been talk about the agricultural common policy, we also something called the Common Fishery Policy. It sets quotas for which member states are allowed to catch each type of fish, as well as encouraging the fishing industry by various market interventions and fishing subsidies. Now, when they control public subsidies to actually disallow, to prevent the government from spending on fisheries as an industry, what it does, it actually creates scarcity of food. You have less fish, and because these fish and fishers are actually private companies, what they're trying to do They are trying to prevent the government from spending public money to produce more food. And the reason for preventing the government from producing more fish, so that there is scarcity of fish. And if there is scarcity of fish in the market, the price of fish will go up, such that now, as I speak, in Britain here and also in Europe, it is almost impossible to eat fish if you're poor. So it's like telling the government, don't waste money on fishery. Leave the fish only for the rich people. Let the poor suffer. Because that's exactly what's happening. If every time the government refuses to support more fishing, it actually is supporting private companies, multi-billion private companies, to make more money from controlling fishery. Because if there is a lack of fish in terms of the market relationship, the price will go up, and this price is there to enrich the super rich who are actually controlling food and energy, for example. In this case, fish, because fish is a type of food, and fish product maybe medicine or something. And this thing, the moment they are not subsidized by the government, the prices keep going up because the market, not the government. The government does not control prices. It has left this mechanism to the market. So the market, when there is less supply, the price will go up. So if the government subsidizes food or fish, what this does, or in agricultural product, what this does is actually the price will come down so that poor people can access food and energy. These will actually reduce the cost of living or even eliminate it. In other words, because of policies such as the prevention of subsidies of food and energy, has created, this has left food and energy to the devices of the market. The market now is running riot because the government is no longer in control of the market, and this is actually impacting on energy and food. And this is actually an indicator of a problem with the public sector left to the market, with the government actually being forced by certain individuals with power to stop financing the public sector. And when they say don't subsidize because it's wasting public money, it means they are saying the 90% of the people should not be actually uh, supported by the government. And because they are poor, in effect, these people who argue against public subsidy, whether agriculture or fishery, they are simply saying that the 90% of the population of the world should be excluded from accessing food and energy. And this is a sign of the times. Like I said in the other videos, people need to understand that the cost of living is created deliberately by capitalists. And it's wrong. And it's not going to stop because the government does not listen to anyone. And no one can speak to the government. It has absolute power. When I talk of the government, I talk of politicians, I talk of ministers, I talk of people who control the economy in the private sector. These are actually communities of power brokers in the world, including the European Union, including the globe, who actually decide who get what. So the danger of this approach is that the majority of the population who work for a living are going to be left out. They're going to be excluded, and employment is going to stop because technology is going to take over running the economy. And if the type of violence being promoted by the state and their allies within the private sector is not prevented, then over 90% of the population are going to die. It's simple as that. Because it's no other way, because it's a form of violence. And government, every time the government, tells us, okay, let us not waste taxpayers' money. They are not talking about the 90% poor of the world. They're talking about the 10% who control the wealth, the super rich, millionaire, multi-billionaire. These are actually regarded to be humans. They are regarded to be taxpayers. The rest of the poor people who work actually to run this country are considered as worthless. That's why there is a cost of living. So these policies set quotas for which member states are allowed to catch each type of fish, as well as encouraging the fishing industry by various market interventions and fishing subsidies. So market interventions, which means the market takes over from the public, from the government. We let the government to run the economy, but under capitalism, the market is now running the country. So the fishing industry is actually being encouraged to adopt a mechanism where market intervenes to control supply and demand, like I was explaining, and they work using their power to stop the state from subsidizing the market. That's why government is no longer subsidizing the market. If it does, then it is pittance. It's quite small and negligible. That's why there is a cost of living. It was introduced in 2009 with the Treaty of Lisbon, which formally enshrined fisheries conservation policy as one of the handful of the exclusive competencies reserved for the European Union. So the European Union carved power for itself to control fishing. When you say conservation policy, it means don't waste fish. Don't waste fish. Don't fish too much. Only fish enough for the few and not for the many. Don't waste food on poor people. Only fish enough. Produce enough fish for the rich. Don't don't produce fish for poor people. The majority of the people, 90%, they waste food. 90% of the population are there to waste food. Food should not be wasted on them. Fish, they should not eat fish. Literally, that's what they're talking about. Because if government doesn't subsidize fish production, poor people cannot buy food because the cost of fish will, as I speak now in Europe, poor people cannot even afford to buy fish now with the cost of living. So, which means what category of people can buy? The multimillionaires and the multi-billionaires. So when we talk about conservation policy, conservation means you have to you should prevent usage. Fish should not be used. You should prevent fish from being taken from the sea for the many. Only take enough. Take a little bit, enough for the rich. That's what it means. That is what conservation policy means. They may say something else. And this competence, this power has been preserved for the European Union. Nobody else has the power to decide when you are actually a member state. And this policy is replicated on not only fish but agriculture. Agriculture means food. It doesn't mean anything else. That means fish and food. Food, as opposed to fish and food should not be produced for the poor. It should only be produced for the rich. In the sense that as long as the government doesn't subsidize fish, agriculture and fish and fishery, poor people will not access food and fishery. The same with energy. anything not subsidized by the government, poor people, the 90% of the population will not be able to access it. That's why there is a cost of living now. Because of failure of the government to finance food, energy, housing, transport, public transport, or anything actually needed, the healthcare, education, you see, and employment. Because now the employer has been given such power as to do whatever they like. The minimum wage is wrong because it is too low. Benefit is wrong, it is too low. So you see, the minimum wage should be supported by the government intervention. It's the same with subsidy. The government should subsidize small and medium businesses so that they can raise the level of the minimum wage. The government is not doing that. It's not helping small and medium business. So the minimum wage is so low that it keeps people permanently into poverty. Even if you work, it doesn't matter how hard you work. And work is the primary employment, to be more specific. Employment is the primary source of income. And if you don't have enough income, you will suffer the cost of living. That is analysis. And if you don't work, you should be given you should be given a state benefit. State benefit, the level is so low that once you are in benefit, you sign your life away into permanent, perpetual poverty. You will never get out of poverty if you're on benefit because of the level. The level is so low because the government is not helping enough. It does help, but it's not helping enough. And if it does help, it's so difficult now to access help. It's so difficult to work because of the condition of work and because of the level of the low level of pay. The condition is getting worse and worse because of the government attitude refusing to support the economy. Once the government refuses to support the economy, 90% of the population, if you have your job now, you will lose it because the economy will be closing down. Only a small proportion of the economy is going to be left for the few and not for the many. There are now economies which build luxury goods and services for the super rich, including food and energy, especially food, housing. They live in mansions, and education is now preserved for the super rich and their families, the 10%. The rest of the country are not going to be educated. They are not going to access health. They are not going to access wealth. They are going to be homeless. They are going to be jobless. They are going to be lifeless. They're going to die unless the government changes its attitude. The only way to help poor people in the world is for the government to work with the super rich to support the economy, to support poor people. If that doesn't happen, people are going to go extinct. The poor people of the world in the next 100 to 200 years, you will not see a single poor person. Only the rich, maybe 10% or even 5%, will be left in the world. And this is what is happening with globalization. This is what's happening with the European Union. And that's why I'm talking about it. That's why I'm linking it with the cost of living. So let us look at regional development. The main article we are going to look at, this is different elements of the European Union, but they just repeating the same thing. Regional policy of the European Union, we're looking at the European Committee of the Regions and European Investment Bank. Different institutions, we'll talk about institutions. These are where policies come from, where they are power. These are power channels. Everything I'm talking about is power channel, and where they use to actually make policies and implement laws and so on and so forth. So we are also classification of regions from 2021 to 2027. This is the vision, Eurovision. Less developed regions, transition regions, more developed regions. So these are actually category of regions of the world, the richer you are, the more likely you can join the European Union. It's like the club of the super rich in terms of nation states. If you're a poor country, you're not going to join, even if you're European, you're in Europe. And, and if you look at the European countries, most of them are actually wealthy, in them, if not all of them. So the five European structural and investment funds are supporting the development of the European Union regions, primarily the underdeveloped ones, located mostly in the states of Central and Southern Europe. So it's a divide between the South and the North in terms of economic relationship. The North are actually richer countries, the South are poorer ones. So in Europe, if you talk about, for example, Eastern Europe, the Eastern European, which was formerly actually most of them were under the Soviet Union, are considered poor. Africa is part of the South, not of Europe but of the globe, and they are poor. If you are a Southerner in Europe, you're poor. If you are a Southerner of the world, like Africa, you are poor also. The North, like Europe, America, is actually rich and poor. Central is 50-50. So when you talk about the five European structural and investment funds are supporting the development of the EU regions, primarily the underdeveloped ones, located mostly in the states of Central and Southern Europe. When they talk of structural implements in terms of the economy, they're talking about the system of the economy, either it is private or public. When they talk about structural adjustment, it means shutting down the public sector and investing in the private sector. In other words, structural adjustment or actually economic structural uh, um, transformation or reform. They like using the word reforms. Every time you heard about the government talk about reforms, what they talk about is privatization. So when you talk of European structural investment funds, these are funds designed to privatize the economy of Europe, because the thinking is that the private sector is the only instrument in the world capable of producing wealth. Whether it is true or not is irrelevant, because, in my opinion, capitalism is able to create wealth in terms of development. But I'm saying any other economic system can produce wealth, not just capitalism. There is no evidence to suggest that only capitalism can create wealth. Um, but there is evidence that any economic system, being cosmetic anyway, can produce wealth as long as it is a system. The failure of capitalism is that it doesn't distribute wealth equitably. The poor get poorer, the richer get richer. So it is so violent that um, we operate a system where the rich will be getting richer, the poor will be getting poorer, and they are going to die, because you see, rich people do not even think about poor people. Poor people do not necessarily think about rich people, because that's the way people behave. But because we, the poor of the world, think about rich people because we are suffering poverty. In other words, our suffering is specific, is poverty related. It's called the cost of living as a crisis. That is it's the equivalent to say we are poor. If you don't suffer the cost of living, believe me or not, you are rich. If you are not struggling with buying food, if you are not struggling with buying clothing and clothes, shoes, and things like that, if you're not struggling to pay for the train, for the fuel, I mean, if you don't struggle to pay rent, you are rich. But I would say that everybody in this country is struggling, is suffering in Britain and in Europe in America, everywhere in the world, everybody is suffering from the cost of living. That is evidence that everyone who suffered actually are poor, and they are the many and not the few. They're probably, I just use the word, the percentage, 90%. That is enough for me. 90% is enough. It could be more, could be less. But to say that, the rich people are actually very few. That's what I'm trying to say. And they don't suffer the cost of living. Because capitalism supports them. Give more money to them. Take money from the poor and give it to the rich. That is a system we're talking about. That's why I'm talking about this. And some people may not understand why I'm going, what I'm going on and on about. If you believe me or not, it's irrelevant. The poor is getting poorer because of capitalism. And the rich is getting richer because of capitalism. And there's nothing we can do about capitalism because it's the only system running the world economy. We cannot change capitalism, but we can actually, the government can intervene to mitigate the impact of capitalism. And also the government can also intervene to support education, cultural education, so that people learn to will to live peacefully. Because if we learn to live peacefully, then when technology develops to produce enough wealth for everyone, wealth is going to trickle down the economy. But if we don't learn to live peacefully, wealth will not trickle down the economy at all. Wealth will be used to destroy the poor first. Secondly, it will be used also to destroy the rich. So the rich and the poor will go extinct if we don't learn to see. Wealth will be the most dangerous thing in the hands of humanity, which does not understand the meaning of peace. And I'm actually trying to suggest that peace can be achieved if we respect one another. If we think, because if you respect yourself, first of all, start with respect. Some people do not respect themselves. And if you don't respect yourself, you don't value your life. If you don't value your life, you don't value anything. What you value, you look after. You see? And you see, there is hope in as far as concerned. Otherwise, there is no hope for humanity. Humanity will go extinct because of violence, because of cultural failure. Culture means educating humanity. It's different from learning how to make money or how to manage money, to be an accountant or an economist. That is development. But culture is the opposite. It's not necessarily the opposite, but it's different. It involves human resources. How you behave, how you think. You see, what you know about yourself, what you know about other people, how you relate with them. You see, and that is a sign of hope, because if we have capability, we think, therefore we are. When we change the way we think, we begin to value our lives and the life of fellow humans, then we are going to learn peace. We learn peace, we are going to live together, and we are going to be stronger together, and we are going to take care of our lives, we are going to take care of other people. That means we are going to really be fearless. We can achieve anything we want. And we are proven on the developmental front by creating a lot of wealth and also by creating technology and developing science. It is proof that humanity is fearsome. We can do anything we want to do, whether bad or good. Culture means we do the right thing, we do good things, which is now what we are losing. Because we have been focusing too much on money. Every time we talk about money. Money, money. And rich people are so greedy that they think the only value we understand is money, material wealth. But we need to stop. We need to continue valuing money. It's the right thing to value money. But our priority is to value humanity. human being, human life. Your life is more important than the money you have. Money is for you. You are not for money and wealth, and that's why there is a cost of living, because our thinking, our cultural education is messed up. Time is running out. If we don't change and begin to educate ourselves, one thing, respect, produces value. If you value something, you begin to look after it. And we are able to do anything, including right now, scientists are actually doing research to slow down aging or even stop it. It's a possibility. You need to understand that if human beings decide to do something, they will achieve it. They will succeed in it. Scientists are now researching. I saw it on the BBC, British, the national British media. If you live in the world, you should know the BBC. If you hear something from the BBC, it's more likely than not to be true. It's more likely to be true than not true. So scientists are now trying to find technology or method of slowing down aging. Aging is the number one killer of human beings or anything. If we didn't age, we wouldn't probably 90%. The magic percentage. 90% would be probably alive. Perhaps more. Maybe 99% would be alive if we didn't age. Aging is terminal. It's a form of terminal illness. And as soon as you're born, you're already dead. You start the process of dying. Scientists are trying to deal with that, and which is very exciting. It means, slow down aging. They are aiming to slow down aging and maybe stop it and reverse it even. If that happens, people don't grow old, or actually lifespan can be expanded from 100 years, which is the average currently, from 100 years to 200, 300, 400, or even 500 years. We will have more time to solve one problem. Now, if with aging, we are running out of time all the time. I mean, if we fail to communicate our knowledge with the next generation, then humanity is going to be in trouble, especially the one who are being born now and having to continue living. And this is something we need to really understand, and I'm trying to link all this thinking with what is happening on the ground in Europe. And you may not be interested in understanding how the European Union is, but that is your problem. Because if you know how important the European Union is, you spend more time trying to learn about the European Union. So another fund, the Investment for Pre-Accession Assistance, provides support for candidate members to transform their country to conform to the EU standard. So the pre-accession fund assistance, these are pre-accession. Accession means countries accessing the European Union. So pre-accession means before accessing the European Union, there is a fund given to candidate nations. Countries who want to access the European Union, to join, to become members of the European Union, are actually given funds to develop their country, to become rich. To become rich in modern economic terms, I mean, you should privatize your economy. That's what reform means. So you conform to the EU standard. EU standard is the standard of capitalism. The market actually set the standard of supply and demand. The standard is to test whether you are a private or a public economy. That is the measure of the EU standard, and also the requirement, the conformity requirement. If you don't actually privatize your economy, you're not going to be a member of the EU. the European Union. It's about. I mean, they can use any terminology they want, but just need to understand what they're talking about. They're talking about privatization. If you privatize, they're going to give you money to sell off your country to the super rich. The European Union is going. If you live in Europe, if your country is in Europe, they're going to give you fund, assistance, financial. The condition for giving you money and wealth is to and support. Because it can be money, it can be wealth, it can be technical support to teach you how to privatize the economy, to move away from public to private sector. That is what they're talking about. And the standard is actually the fruit of the pudding is actually in the eating of the labor of capitalism, which is actually privatization, which is also marketization. The market rules, no longer the government. The government is already private. The public government is being shut down, is being transferred to be the public to become the public the private government. So demographic transition to a society of aging population, low fertility rates, and depopulation of non-metropolitan regions is tackled within these policies. So when you talk about demographic transition to a society of aging population, I don't know what that means. When you talk about transition, if you talk about aging population means there are more old elderly people. People live long. So when you transition to a society of a democratic transition to a society of aging population, to encourage people to live long, I don't know exactly what that means, right? It's anyone's guess. But when you talk of low fertility rate, you transition to a society where there are more elderly people, there is low fertility rates. You transition to that, you change from a type of society, from that type to the one with low fertility rates. Okay? I don't know how, I mean, maybe birth control or something. I don't know what they are talking about. You also transform to a society of the population of non-metropolitan region. Non-metropolitan region means the villages and countryside. So you remove people away. The population means you reduce the population of countryside. That's a non-metropoly. Metropoly means cities and towns. Non-metropoly is actually villages and countryside. So if you live on your land, probably you should be reduced. Which means probably you should be removed, extracted from the countryside. Maybe you should be sent into concentration camp. I don't know, because where are you going to take you if they remove you away from the regions, non-metropolitan regions? And these are policies designed for these purposes, to depopulate or unpopulate. I think depopulation is the word they have used. Depopulation of villages and countryside. They want to take people away from there, and bring them maybe into the city. I don't know how they're going to do that, because if you're a rich person, maybe you will be allowed to live in the countryside because there are few. The population of poor people, I say, they are about 10% of rich people, about 10%. Which means if you're poor, because you probably can't live anywhere anyway. You can't live in the village, you can't live in the city. Non-metropolitan or metropolitan, you cannot live there because you don't have money. And the government is no longer helping you. So it's something like that. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. As usual, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. Share with family and friends. This video is now 1 hour long. I'll probably produce another one. I probably won't would produce it. If I don't produce it today, probably produce it another time. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Bye bye.